Welcome to the first Blue Collar Coder architecture speedrun. And on this one, we're going to be using Nest as our API layer. We're going to be using Axios to go and access that API layer. And then we're going to be using React and React Native on top of that. Let's get, actually, we're not going to get into it just yet. I do have an announcement. I am joining the React Roundup podcast as one of the co-hosts. And so there'll be a link to that in the description. If you're here from that podcast and checking out Blue Collar Coder, thank you so much for showing up. And if you're a Blue Collar Coder viewer, well, go check out React Roundup podcast. It's awesome stuff. Okay, let's get into our first architecture speedrun. Let's get after it. Okay, so I'm going to go into my temp directory, and then I'm going to use NX. This is going to be what we're going to use to kind of bring this all together is the NX dev system. And I will call this multi-platform to-dos because it uses a bunch of platforms, in particular React and React Native. And we're going to be building a simple to-do app. We use and just start off as empty. So here's the rules of a speed run. I'm not going to concentrate on UI. I'm not going to concentrate on the completeness of a to-do application. I totally leave that to you. All we're going to be doing is effectively what they would call in Agile a spike, all the way from React and React Native, all the way down to the API layer, in this case, Nest. All right, let's bring up our project. Okay, I'm going to go back to the terminal. I'm going to go take a look at all the extensions that NX gives us because we're going to want a bunch of these. We're going to want Nest. That's going to be our API layer. We are going to want React and React Native. And I think that should about do it. Okay, good to go. Let's go and generate our Nest application. So we do that using NX. And then G for generate, and then the pattern is going to be narwhal nest, and the app is what we want from it, and we'll call that one API. And that's going to go build an API project over here in apps. Now let's go take a look at our main. So that's going to go and set up our Nest factory, which is really this app over here, and the important parts are the controller and then the service. So currently it's going to do this welcome to API service. All right, all we need to do is go down here and do NX and then serve on our API, and that's going to launch that API service for us. And that's on localhost 3333. Cool, very nice. Make it big so you can see it. All right, great. Okay, so what do we need for some to-dos? Well, we're going to go and first create an interface for our to-do. So we'll call that to-do. And it's going to have an ID, which is number. It's going to have text, which is a string. And it's going to have done, which is a Boolean. And in our app service, we're going to have an array of those. Private to-dos, which can be an array of to-dos and starts off at nothing. And you know what? We're just going to return that as get data. And we will change that to a to-do array. And while we're here, let's go and add on the mutations that we want to be able to do onto this. So let's do add, and we'll give it text, which is a string. That's going to return a void. And then we'll just push on a new to-do. The ID would be the current length. And then text, and then done, we'll start it at false. And there you go, there's our adder. And then we'll have one for setting and toggling the done state. So we'll call that set done. And given an ID, which would be a number, we want to set that done value, which would be a Boolean. And again, we're going to return a void. And so in this case, we're going to do a map. So we're going to say this.todos equals this.todos map. And so we'll run over every to-do. And then we'll return a new to-do with it, but we'll take a look at the done field. And if the to-do ID equals the ID that we got coming in as a request, then we'll use whatever the done is that they gave us. Otherwise, we'll just keep whatever it was there already there. So there you go. Let me fix my syntax a little bit. Okay, so that's all we need for our service. That has set up our to-dos and kept our data going. This would obviously go to a database if you wanted, that's fine. But now we need to expose that to the external API, and the way that we do that is through this controller and these really cool decorators in here. So the first one is get data. That's working right now. It's a get request. And what we want to do is also route a post request to add one. So we just create a new post here. And we'll call this create. And you also get to declare a body. And then you get to define the payload, which in this case would be a text blob. Then I can even destructure that if I want. So now I just have text. Cool. And in this case, we're just going to route that to add. Give it to add, like that. And then I'll add one more post to do set done. And all I need to do is add set done in there. So this is going to give us any post to HTTP, let's see, what is it? This API is going to do this route right here. And then let's do set done. So this is going to give us a post on API set done. You can do ID mapping, all that kind of stuff as well. I'm just going to do something very simple here. So in this case, we're going to have an ID, which would be that number, and then done, which would be that Boolean. And then we'll do ID in here and done. And we'll just route those to set done. Awesome. Okay, and then the last thing I need to do in here is set up cores. So I'm going to go up here to app, and I'm going to say app and enable cores. So cores is just how you enable the ability for anybody from any domain to call our API service. Normally, you'd only be able to call it from the API where your pages are served. So talking about pages, let's go on to our next thing. So with that done, let's go and generate our React app that's going to call this. So let's do NX and then G for generate, and then narwhal again and React. In this case, then we again want an app, and we'll call this one web app. It's asking me for the style sheets, React router, blah, blah, blah. All right, looking good. So let's go over to our app and get our web app over here. And again, we'll do NX serve and then web app just to see what we've got. All right, looking pretty good. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is add Axios, because that's what we're going to use to access the data. So we'll do yarn add Axios right at the top level, and then anything that uses that, we'll have that as a dependency. Okay, great. Let's take a look over in source at app.tsx and just start removing most of this boilerplate. In fact, all of this. Bye, 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 bye. Don't need any of that. But what we do need is we need use effect and use state from React. And then we need Axios from Axios. Great, perfect. Okay, let's start up this app by using a use effect. And we'll use an empty dependency array because we want that to start on page load effectively, or component load. And we'll also create a spot for our use state, our to-dos. Okay, now what are we going to do? Because we want an array of to-dos. We need that to-do definition. And it is stuck over here in the app, in the API app. So it's stuck here. And we don't want it there. We want it in a shared location. So the next thing we want to do is create a shared types library. So I'm going to do nxg and then do narwhal node, because the basic node library, and call it shared types. Perfect. Okay, now we can go over to libs and we got shared types. Awesome. And then over here in index or over here in shared types, there we go. And we'll just paste in the interface for to do. We'll export that. This guy just exports anything in there, so that's going to show up nicely. Awesome. So let's go back over here to our app.tsx, and now we can import to do from, and now we even get hinted about it. So let's do mp to dos, shared types, and there we've got our to do definition. Awesome. But let's also go and make sure that it's synchronized with our API. So we'll go back over here and grab this literally and just paste it into the service. And now that one also has the same definition of to do, which is awesome. It's great. Those are absolutely synchronized between those two things. So now we want to do Axios and then get off of that route. So let's see, 33 API. Awesome. But we want to do this asynchronously. So you know what we'll do? We'll create a use callback for this. And we'll call that get to dos because we're going to want to do that multiple times. Give it a use callback. And this is going to be an async callback because we want to use await. And we're not going to have any dependencies on that. And this one is just going to call that Axios get. And await that. And that's going to have a response. And we can even type it. We can say that this is going to get an array of to-dos. And then from there, we're going to be optimistic and say that's always going to work. And we're going to get back our data and put it in there. And so now all we need to do on our use effect is just call get to-dos. All right, let's go take a look at the to-dos data by just JSON stringifying it in here. And let's see. Nice, comes in as an empty array. We don't obviously know if that works or not yet. So let's go and add an uncontrolled input to allow us to add a new to-do. Create a new div down here. It'll have an input field. And then it's uncontrolled because we'll just have a reference to it. So we'll say ref equals and then text input ref. And we'll bring in useRef up here. And we'll say useRef. And it wants to know what kind of ref we've got. So we've got an HTML input element that we're looking at. And we'll start off at null. And that should be enough. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we've got ourselves an input. Awesome. Uncontrolled means that you don't have to worry about setting state and all that. It's very good if you don't need validation. Obviously, you want to add that later if you want to build on this example. But for right now, this is fine. All right, let's go ahead and add a button called add with an on-click handler. It's going to on add to do. Make another callback called on add to do, use callback. And in that case, we're going to do another Axios thing. In this case, we're going to do Axios post. Same location as before, but we just give it a body. So in this case, it's going to be text. And then that's going to be text input ref.current.value. Now, TypeScript is going to appropriately tell us that that could be empty. So let's do if around that, just to make sure that it's not undefined. And then once that's done, we'll set that to an empty string. And there you go. Okay, and we need to go get the new to-dos. So we'll do that as well. Get to-dos, and away we go. So let's see, was it giving us grief? Well, it's giving us grief about get to-dos there, and get to-dos here, and also we should do an async to make sure that we wait until this is done, which means we need to add an await here. So we're gonna await this post, and then we're gonna set the current value to an empty string once it's done, and then we'll get the new to-dos. So let's give it a try and see if it works. Wow, so fast. Speedrun. Okay, here we go. So the next thing we want to do is put a nice little UI on this and allow us to toggle the done state. So let's go and go back up here to our to-dos and replace that with a map of the to-do. And that's going to have a div in it. For each to-do, that's going to have their IDs. And then an input field of a type checkbox. And the current text. Let's take a look, see how that looks. Oh, perfect, great. Okay, doesn't do anything though. So let's do an on change here. And with that, we're gonna say on toggle and give it the to-do ID. I'll take a number. And in this case, we want the value to change based on the to-dos because we're going to toggle stuff, right? So we need to know what the current value is. And in order to do that, we need to keep that callback up to date. So we're going to bring in to-dos here as well and make sure that we change anytime this callback anytime that to-dos are changed. So again, it's going to be async because we're going to call that post method. And then we're going to call get to-dos. But we're not going to call API like that. We are going to call set done because that's what we created to do the done flipping. And that one takes an ID, which is the current ID coming in. And then done, which would be the inverse of whatever that to-do done is. So we'll do to-dos, and we'll find that ID. So we'll take that to-do, and we'll say that if it matches the to-do ID of that, then we want the done value from that. Cool. That'll work. Okay. A couple more things. We need to add get to-dos to our dependency list because it may change. And then I also need to set the checked here to be to-do done. All right, looking good. Let's toggle it on and then refresh. And looks like it's persisted. That's great. Okay, cool. All right, let's go on now and create our React Native app. It's going to look at exactly the same data source. How cool is this going to be? I'm loving it. Okay, for this one, I'm going to actually go and create a new terminal. So we're going to do nxg narwhal React Native, ask for an app, and then say that we want this one to be called RN app. Okay, now really important, it actually took a little while for me to get React Native set up on my machine. It'll probably be the same for you. React Native is extremely particular about the setup that it wants on your machine. So my recommendation to you is to go through a React Native starter kit first before trying this. So you make sure that you have a setup that is capable of doing React Native. You got to get Ruby set up and a whole bunch of stuff. So it's kind of a pain, but it's worth doing. Okay, so with that done, let's get rid of that. Now we're going to need not one, but two terminals for this one. The first is going to run the Metro bundler. So we'll call that nx start, and then we'll say rn app. And that's going to run the Metro bundler. That will keep the JavaScript up to date. That's already running, so we're going to do nx run iOS. So we're going to run the iOS instance of our React Native app, rn app. Okay. Now we finally gotten to the point where we're actually going to run the app, but we're still doing this bundling. We're bringing in the bundle for the app. And there we go. Awesome. Good starting point for our application. Let's go take a look at the code. So now we've got RN app over here, and we'll take a look at source and then app. And you can see this big old boilerplate down here. This is the whole welcome to RN app, all of that stuff. So we're just going to get rid of all that. All right, let's save. And there we go, empty app, great. Okay, so now we want to go bring in that data, but we want to go and share the business logic between these two applications. That's part of the point of this. We want to make sure that we can share business logic between our React Native and our React app. So the next thing we need to do is build a React library that has a custom hook that does the exact same things that we were doing in the React app, but in that custom hook, and then we can reuse that custom hook between both. So let's do a new window. And we'll do nx generate and then narwhal react. In this case, we're going to use a library, and we'll call this one data access. That's what it's going to do, is access the data. Okay, let's go back over to our web app and go and grab the code, essentially, for all of this. Probably down to about here with the toggle. There we go, great. And take that over to the libs, and we'll just put that in our TSX file. And we are going to call this one, instead of that, we're going to call this one use to-dos. All right, that all looks pretty good so far. So we got our state, we got our getter, we got our effect that it's going to get it first. We don't have the text input ref. And we'll call this one add to do. And that'll take a text, which is a string. I'll just drop that in there. We don't need this conditional. We're not going to do that or that, but everything else looks great. So that's add to do, and then toggle to do. That's pretty good, actually. That looks just fine. So what we want to do is return a bunch of stuff out of this custom hook. So this custom hook is going to return to-dos, as well as the get to-dos function, as well as add to do and toggle to do. So that's going to be the stuff coming out of this data access. Now let's see. Okay, that looks good. So we have an exported use to-dos hook. Okay, let's go back over and actually consume that on our React side. So now we're going to import use to-dos from our project, MP to-dos, and then now we've got data access. Perfect, great. And we'll do to-dos and add to-do and toggle to-do from use to-dos, just like that. So let's get rid of a lot of this code. Okay, we only need the text input ref there. In this case, we're going to add to-do with the current value. And that's already going to do a get to-dos for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And we don't have to worry about this. But we should add on there add to-do, since we're using that now. And then toggle to do. Oh, this, I don't even think we need this. So let's get rid of all of this. And now we just go over here and toggle to do ID. Man, that is slick. Now we don't even need Axios or any of this stuff. Cool. Let's go take a look and see how it works. All right, let's go and restart the web server, which I think is this one. Great, awesome. Perfect, cool. All right, so let's go copy this one out of here and then paste it into our React Native app over here. Awesome, like that. And then we'll do const to-dos equals use to-dos, like that. Okay, so let's map through all those to-dos and take each to-do and create a view with a key of the to-do ID, and then text with the to-do text. And then in order to see it, I need to make it a little bigger, make the font size 36, and then the padding is 5. Let's make it nice and big like that. And there you go, boom, same data source. But let's actually try it out. So another thing we need to do is create a touchable opacity, like that. We'll create a refresh button for this. And then inside of that, we're gonna have a text that says refresh. Take a look, that works. Okay, cool, it's small, but it's there. And then we'll have an on press. And that's gonna do a on refresh. Now we need to define on refresh, so we need to bring in a use callback. And we'll create it, const refresh equals use callback. And all I'm gonna do in this one is just call get to dos. That's just gonna do our refresh for us, so we'll just call that. All right, so that's gonna go back to the service anytime we ask for it. And we'll do another one, add it, go back to our React Native app, hit refresh, and boom. Okay, there you go, Speedrun done. You've got a React Native app and a React app, both of which talk through a shared custom hook, which represents our business logic, to a shared backend with NestJS, all of which uses shared types and sitting, of course, on the monorepo structure of NX. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the first speedrun. If you have questions or comments, be sure to put those in the comments section down below. YouTube really loves comments, and so I'd really appreciate it if you had any questions or just want to say, hey, this is a great video, just put that down in the comment section below. Of course, feel free to hit that like button if you like the video and hit the subscribe button if you really like the video and you want to see more of it.